what's up guys, this is Church of Caboose. For today's Destiny 2 video, I thought we would talk a lot about what should you expect before you buy Destiny 2. I noticed that there's lots of folks on different media outlets that are like, hey, this game's terrible, and when they explain why, I'm like, you clearly just don't know what Destiny 2 is about, or maybe even what action MMOs are about. So before we get too far into this whole video, if you do enjoy the video, make sure you click the like button, and if you enjoy the video and my content, I do things like guides, mostly these days, reviews and my opinions. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. So the whole reason we're talking about this is because, again, people seem to have very offset expectations when it comes to what Destiny 2 is like. I feel like a lot of players are like, hey, I like Call of Duty. Call of Duty's great. Destiny has the PvP aspect. Therefore, it must be like Call of Duty. And so they buy the game, and then they're like, oh my gosh, this game is trash. And they either trash talk it all over media outlets and or just quit playing the game altogether. So I thought if I was to set some expectations beforehand, this would be a rather nifty thing. So I want to talk about some things that I really just feel you should know about Destiny 2, and this would apply to other action MMOs such as Monster Hunter and the Elder Scrolls of Skyrim. I know they may not necessarily be action MMOs, but they are MMOs, RPGs, all that whole acronym combinations, and they do share some similarities with Destiny 2, so this perhaps will be a more broad video than just for Destiny 2. So the first thing I want to make sure you guys are aware of is that this game takes time. You need time to get gear. You need time to gear up for the end game, and it takes time to build a build that will beat the game. So we'll talk specifically about some of those things later, but really guys, there's a lot of people that hop in and they expect, hey, I can be someone that plays a couple hours a week and I can compete at the same level, gear, skill, everything, as someone that plays 10 hours a week. This is just kind of a hypothetical. There's definitely lots of players in these genres that play this game full time. I am getting close to being one of them. And it's just something you guys need to make sure you're aware of. When you hop in, there are definitely pieces of gear that can drop that you can get that are considered to be very valuable. And there are other pieces of gear, such as raid exotics like Anarchy, Taraba, and then you have pinnacle weapons such as Wendigo, Mountaintop, Recluse, Not Forgotten, that sort of thing, that will definitely take you lots of time to acquire that piece of gear. I know for comp and Crucible, there's lots of folks that are like, oh my gosh, it's so stupid. Why can't I only play 2 hours a week and I'm getting my ass kicked by Revoker? Well, unfortunately, while you can definitely acquire Revoker over time while only playing 2 hours a week, the ones that put in the most time are going to have that way sooner than you and will be able to take full advantage of it. One of the other things I want to mention is that in games like Destiny 2, especially Destiny 2, there is endgame and there is regular play. Regular play would be things like story missions, public events, free roaming around the planets. We got heroic adventures, strike playlists, nightfall playlists, Crucible playlists, that sort of thing. Endgame would be the very pinnacle, or what should be really aspirational content inside of that mode. Examples would be raids, hard raids or prestige raids. Then you got Master and Grandmaster Nightfalls, as well as Comp and Trials of Osiris. Those are just some examples of the endgame. Now when you have endgame, those are things that happen after you've beaten the game. Not necessarily with Destiny 2 where you couldn't play Trials without beating the game, but more there are things that help build on top of your game experience that are usually labeled as endgame because you kind of need to have things like power advantage, you need to have things like certain gear, and the list kind of goes on. So just be aware before you get into Destiny 2 that there are parts of the game that are considered endgame that's not generally accessible for everyone. Now, everyone can definitely do these things in the endgame, but not everyone is either able to, willing to, or has the ability to do all of these things. So that's something just to be aware of. So don't be buying Destiny 2 and then you're thinking to yourself, hey, in 2 days, I can do the newest raid. may not be the case. Some folks it is, but those are the folks that are like me, have been playing Destiny 2 and Destiny in general for years and are up to date on the content. And so if a new raid drops within a couple of days, it's probably feasible to at least attempt that new raid. Whereas folks, you just bought the game today, then you would have a bit of a hard time. This would especially apply to players that are either free to play or especially ones that are coming to Destiny 2 with the Beyond Light expansion on November 10th. It looks amazing, and I imagine we are going to have a lot of folks that are going to be super duper interested, and so I think this endgame regular play aspect will be a huge deal for those folks that are new to Destiny 2. Not a whole lot of games, especially Call of Duty, have a regular play and an end game. In Call of Duty, you have your regular multiplayer, your regular campaign, and then if you feel like it, you could do kind of like the competitive mode, whereas Destiny 2, you are rewarded the most by doing the end game. Current examples from Season of 11 would be the Garden of Salvation raid, Grandmaster Nightfalls, Master Nightfalls, then you've got these various raids because of Moments of Triumph, and you have Trials and Comp. Those are kind of really the main end games, as well as, I guess, Master Nightmare Hunts. Now let's move on to the next thing that we want to talk about. In games like Destiny 2, you have RNG. That means random number generated. So people will talk about, hey, before we complete this encounter, everyone take a knee to RNGesus. All this means is that some loot, and I would argue, in fact, most loot inside of looter shooters like Destiny 2, this would also include Borderlands 3, are based off of random number generators. Meaning, you complete an activity and you have a chance of a weapon to drop. It doesn't mean it will for sure drop. A great example would be Anarchy from the end of the Scourge of the Past raid. Once you beat that boss from Scourge of the Past, you might get the very coveted Anarchy, which the last time I looked about 2-3 weeks ago, as I'm recording now on July 18th, 2020, was about 2.5% to 3% of players actually had the Anarchy exotic grenade or exotic grenade launcher, and that was something you could only get by beating the raid. So when you made a completion, you had a chance of it dropping. If it didn't drop, well, better luck next time was hopefully the idea. 100K Voices was the same thing for Last Wish. Taraba is the same thing for Crown of Sorrow, and there's lots and lots of other weapons such as spare rations, and the list goes on, that are for other aspects inside of the game. So don't expect, for the most part, to be able to put in 1 or 2 clears on an activity and get the weapon you want. Also, there are different rolls of that weapon. Games like Destiny 2 have random rolls, meaning you can have, for example, a spare rations hand cannon which comes from Gambit or the Reckoning inside of Destiny 2. You could have a buddy that also has the spare rations, but you could both have very different roles, meaning the perks are different. You have a masterwork that's different. You can have a range masterwork and your friend has stability, and that would give you almost a completely different gun. Now, not necessarily meaning the role you have isn't better than the role the other person has, so some of it depends on your playstyle. It's just worth knowing before you buy this game, you can't necessarily do every single activity and get the same drop as your friends. There are some things like quests. When you do these quests, you either get that legendary or that exotic weapon, and the exotics will always be the same for everybody. That is a thing that happens. Felwinter's Lie is a good example of a legendary weapon that is the same options for everybody. And then you got exotics like the Ruinous Effigy, which is the same thing for everybody once they pick that weapon up. So you guys need to make sure you know RNG exists, and that kind of plays into the time needed in the game. If you're wanting to make builds on armor, get all those weapons with the rolls you like, you need to be down to understand it takes time. Not everything will happen right off the bat. You could get really, really lucky, like a friend of mine who got Anarchy on her 3rd clear of Scourge of the Past raid, but most people aren't that lucky, so make sure you keep in mind that RNG is a thing, and time is a huge factor when you consider RNG. Then we have these things in the game that tend to have skill gap. Skill gap usually means something that you have is really good, but only if you yourself is good. A decent example would be something like Not Forgotten. Back in the day when it was really, really good, it was really, really good because if you got headshots, the thing absolutely destroyed because of its rate of fire. Now, it's still really good right now, it's just not God tier like it was before. So that's what I mean by skill gap. Some weapons take an overall know-how of the game. For example, when I do a prophecy run and if I hit 2.5 million damage dealt to the boss, some people are like, oh my gosh, like how did you do that? Well, part of that's because I need to know what things work well together within the game, use things that are, I guess, work well together, and that builds upon the damage. Then you have other things like PvP related that require you to do stuff like you have to hit headshots or some other kind of a thing like dodge and then shoot, stuff like that where it's not super intuitive and easy for everyone to use, and that can make weapons good for everyone. Now I wanted to mention this because I myself can fall into the trap of seeing some huge content person putting out a video saying such and such weapon is God tier, and then I throw on that weapon and it absolutely sucks for me. That's because I'm not nearly as good as whatever content creator was that said this weapon was God tier, and so it's not going to work as well for me. So that's something you guys need to make sure you keep in mind, especially when you're starting off in the games like Destiny 2, and especially when it comes to the multiplayer environment, you will be playing against folks that could have been playing this game for years, know how stuff works, and just because something overall is pretty good does not necessarily mean it'll be fantastic in your hands. So just because you were like, hey, I got the spare rations, everyone said it was going to be amazing, I can't use it to save my life. That doesn't necessarily mean that weapon is no good, it just maybe means you gotta get a little bit more used to the game, maybe work on your skills, and then that weapon will fly off the charts for you. So hopefully that my explanation clears up the whole talk about the skill gap. Then in games like Destiny 2, you have leveling up. Everything it requires you to have some sort of a level. Now, depending upon the season or the content you're playing, that level required might be very low, or it could be very high. If you look at something like Grandmaster Nightfalls, the power cap is really high. You need to be as high as you possibly can in order to have the best chance at beating that Grandmaster Nightfall. And the same thing can apply to some Crucible stuff. So you guys just gotta be aware, powering up takes time. Unless you're someone like myself who's been playing Destiny 2 for years and is more or less keeping up with the current pinnacle base power cap, you might kind of have to play catch up for a while. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't play most or if not all the content. It just means you need to be aware that some things might be vastly more difficult for you than some of your friends or clanmates. And finally, world drops versus content-specific rewards. When you're playing games like Destiny 2, when you complete an activity, you complete a story mission, you're just running around killing stuff in the free world, you will have world drops. Those are engrams that just appear on the ground. Things like when you complete a Nightfall and it drops to your inventory, that would be content-specific drops, and the two are different. And if you're confused about how this all works together, make sure you check out my video I made about how to level from 750 to 1010 power. It's a little bit older, from a season or two ago, depending upon when you're watching this video. But until Destiny makes a huge change to how powering up works, it still applies and should be super duper useful, so that way I don't have to go into too much detail. But basically, different events yield different levels of rewards, and so you need to be aware of that before hopping into the game, because if you just hop in and do stuff that gives you nothing, it'll take a long time to power up. But if you hop in and you're intentionally trying to power up, you're worrying about what gives you the best rewards and where things come from world drops, because, for example, spare rations isn't necessarily a given weapon for a content-specific drop, but if you play something like Gambit on your way to leveling up because it gives you a pinnacle reward, you could have the chance of a spare rations hand cannon dropping for you, and so that's kind of the difference. World drops are completely random. Content-specific drops are you can only, if you play the specific thing, you have a chance to gain the specific weapon, or if you do this quest, you will get this specific piece of gear. That's how that kind of all works. Alright guys, those are some things I thought were really important to know before buying Destiny 2 in order to try and make your playing playing experience the best thing it possibly could be. I really appreciated it all so much that you watched. Please let me know down below if you have any concurrences, or you're like, hey, this is great, or if you think it sucked, if you have different opinions. Let's all kind of share and have a talk. These are just the things I felt were the most important to share with all of you. Thank you all so much for watching. I am Church of Caboose. Have a great week and happy grinding, y'all.